So practice spotting, it sounds like an empathy practice, right? And I've been thinking about this a lot, that the problem with most corporate American jobs is the expectation to be professional, which I do think is an important virtue in a professional setting where if you're trading money for your services or your time, you should you should be able to not burden people with everything about you and have them expend more emotional energy. But at the same time, um, part of the job, and Seth Godin talks about this, is expending the emotional energy in your work and actually engaging with other people and other individuals and recognizing them as humans. And so the problem with corporate America, my current thesis is that we define ourselves by what we do, not by who we are and who we know. We're not human doings, we're human beings, and recognizing the narrative of that person's life and recognizing what they think their narrative is to the outside world. Because if you can work with that narrative and they feel like you understand their narrative, they're going to be loyal in the sense of like the market, like a rabid fan base for Tesla is the reason I think Tesla is so successful or like Apple's so successful is they align their story to the story of their customers.
Mm.
And the practice spot, and I mean, in the sense of practice spotting, if you want to use like the Apple example, it's because they're a big example in building your story brand, which is a great book for designers that want to understand marketing, or anybody that wants to understand marketing. Is the fact that uh, they align their story of, hey, you could get any computer, you can get a PC, but if you use a Mac, it's because you like to make things, you like to break the status quo, and it's like, oh, that's my story, right? And I think like understanding what you think your story is an artifact, or I guess the fossil, if you want to use a King example, that like the story's already there. You just have to uncover it, observe it, document it in the form of highlighting what you value. It's like, oh, like why is this story my and yeah, that's just this is my hyper obsession is just to make connecting dots between books because I'm going to quote another one. So uh, if you listen this far, sorry, I'll finish. I'll tie the loop. But in Find Your Why, which is written by Simon Sinek's team, they actually do a workshop to help you find your why. And basically, it's a facilitator asking you to talk about your formative years because their thesis is that your why comes from your teenage. It's the years that you are kind of establishing an identity, and I would say maybe it goes into your early 20s as well. And then they basically just listen to you tell your story, and then it's like, "Oh, how did you feel when that happened?" or whatever, and that story that you tell is basically everything that informs who you are as a person and what you value. And so for me, like, when I went through that exercise, I found out, okay, I like making people feel seen, heard, and understood, because when I do that, people tend to be more communicative, more vocal, more collaborative, because they have that, like, psychological safety to be able to just be themselves around me, and it served me very well in my career, but yeah, I'm just not convinced that being a professional and acting corporate is actually helping businesses. Like, I do think being a professional means, like, not overburdening people with, like, your problems, but there is, like, a certain, um, level of management that needs to happen with people on the team to make sure that they are being allocated towards the activities that really like fit who they are as a person, what their story is.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I appreciate everything you just cited there. And there's that concept of being your authentic self in the office, and that certainly has some baggage. But being able to operate the same way in our personal and professional spheres of existence, leveraging our same values, being able to be our authentic selves, that's a non trivial thing. And it's certainly incumbent upon those who are in control of decision making within the business. I'm not going to say leadership because a leader can be someone on their first day of the job, but those who are in control of decision making in their various levels of hierarchy to make sure that is how the culture exists. But back to the point of practice spotting. Say, like, if someone told a story of on the way into work, someone asked me for directions, and I stopped and gave them. And you can kind of dig into why did you stop and give them directions? Well, I've been lost in the past, so I know how that feels. You can immediately extract empathy from that. And then the kind of one of the beautiful parts of the Make Meaningful Work platform that I cited is that not only can you identify a value from that and leverage that and grow from that, but then we could also leverage that back into a work environment and make it a measurable, trackable thing. And I think that's where the magic kind of comes into play. So if I know empathy is kind of a key value of my team or the individuals. There's an example I think I gave in the book, or maybe it's one of my talks, but I in one of the teams I managed, a design team. They would go into this status meeting with the account side of the business, and it was a very politically fraught dynamic where they would the respective teams would come in. The energy was adversarial, headbutting based dynamic, and there'd be going into the meeting, there'd be anxiety and lack of productivity in the meeting. Wouldn't be the best example of productivity. And then coming after the fact, you kind of come out of a meeting, you're like, oh God, that sucked. And like people are kind of coming down from that. So you think about the wave of lack of productivity just by itself was intense and it kind of tails off and people level out. And if we leverage empathy, what if we go in there and rather than getting into a pseudo shouting match, what if we just let the other side talk first? What if we just let them express their lens? What if we just kind of sit back and put our active listening hats on, our observational hats on, and leverage tools that we should already leverage as designers and researchers and see what these folks have to say. And we were able to understand that it's rolling downhill. They're getting hammered from the client. They come in, they're kind of cranky. We come in, we're anticipating the cranky, so we kind of meet the cranky energy. And just letting them connect with these folks as human beings and leveraging that empathy. And you can kind of say, okay, so how did this work? We were able to track via some artifacts. Meeting one, how did it work? We just let them talk. Oh, it kind of cut the tension a little bit, or it didn't do anything. Okay, so then we pivot and we try X, Y, Z. By leveraging those simple identified values and tactics where we thrive back into office dynamics, it really helps the environment rise to the occasion of where we find out we're fulfilled. And I feel like if we're fulfilled by our work or we're fulfilled by our coworkers, but the culture is kind of not doing it, then we're not, then there's still that disconnection. And disconnection drives sleepwalking, which drives lower quality of work, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there are all these kind of puzzle pieces and beautiful dominoes that kind of fit together.